The heavy wooden door groaned open, its iron hinges groaning like the echoes of a forgotten empire. Marcus Valerius emerged from the shadows of his cell, his wrists still raw from the unforgiving iron shackles that had bound him for weeks. The chill of the prison seeped into his bones, but it was the weight of his thoughts that bore down most heavily. Silence wrapped around him like a suffocating cloak, broken only by the distant clang of metal and the low murmur of voices beyond the stone walls. Tiberius stood waiting, his stern expression softened by a flicker of relief. "The praetor has decreed your release, Senator," he said quietly, his voice a steady anchor amid the storm of uncertainty. "But under strict conditions." Marcus nodded, the pride in his posture tempered by the knowledge of what that release truly meant. Freedom, yes, but shackled by the new order, a Rome ruled not by the traditions he had sworn to uphold, but by the ruthless pragmatism of men like Cassius Drusus. A bitter irony settled in his chest. As they stepped into the cold morning air, Marcus's eyes scanned the city. Rome was a different place now. The grandeur of marble and gold replaced by crumbling stone, the air thick with dust and despair. Citizens moved like ghosts through the streets, their faces etched with fear and resignation. The once proud heart of the empire beat faintly, struggling against the encroaching darkness. The journey back to the family villa was marked by a silence heavy with unspoken fears. Livia waited at the threshold, her sharp eyes meeting Marcus's with a guarded intensity. There was no warmth in her greeting, only the pragmatic resolve that had become her armor in these turbulent times. "You are free," she said, her voice steady but brittle, but not unbound. "Your enemies watch closely." Gaius stood nearby, his youthful energy subdued but not extinguished. His gaze flickered between father and mother, a storm of conflicting loyalties raging within him. He had orchestrated much behind the scenes to secure Marcus's release, yet the price was steep. The family's survival now hinged on alliances Marcus found impossible to condone. Lucilla appeared quietly, her delicate features drawn with concern. "Brother," she whispered, "the gods watch us from afar, silent and distant. We must find our own path in this darkness." Marcus allowed himself a moment to absorb the weight of their words. The family he had returned to was not the one he had left, fractured, weary, and forced to navigate a treacherous new world. Inside the ancestral home, shadows danced on the walls, flickering with the light of candles, struggling against the encroaching gloom. The atmosphere was thick with the residue of battles fought in whispered conversations and guarded glances. Livia approached Marcus, her steps measured. "The Senate has changed," she said softly. "We must change with it, or be swept away." He met her gaze, the conflict within him plain to see. "To what cost, Livia? Our honor, our legacy." "Survival," she replied firmly. "That is the legacy we must leave." The words hung between them, a chasm neither could bridge easily. Marcus's rigid adherence to tradition had been his compass, but the compass now spun wildly in the shifting winds of power. Later, in the quiet solitude of his chambers, Marcus unfastened the heavy cloak that had become a symbol of his burdens. His hands trembled not with weakness, but with the enormity of the sacrifices demanded of him. The empire he had served with unwavering loyalty was no more. In its place lay a fragile new order, shaped by pragmatism and betrayal. He thought of Gaius, impetuous, passionate, and unafraid to challenge the old ways. Perhaps the sun's vision offered a glimmer of hope amid the ruins. Yet, the cost of that hope was steep, and the path uncertain. The night deepened, and with it, the shadows of doubt and resolve intertwined. Marcus Valerius, once the steadfast guardian of Rome's fading glory, now stood at a crossroads. To survive, he must embrace the very decay he had fought to resist. As dawn painted the sky with muted hues, the Valerius family gathered once more. Their faces bore the scars of loss and compromise, but their eyes held a flicker of reluctant hope. The empire's ashes smouldered around them, but from those ashes a new future might yet rise. The price of survival had been paid in full. The question remained, what legacy would they leave behind? And so, with heavy hearts and guarded spirits, they faced the uncertain dawn. Bound by blood, burdened by history, and driven by the fragile promise of resilience amid decay. The evening air hung heavy over Rome, thick with the scent of damp stone and the distant murmur of restless citizens. Within the dim confines of a secluded chamber, Gaius Valerius sat across from a towering barbarian chieftain, the flickering light of oil lamps casting long shadows over the worn tapestries that clung to the cracked walls. The room was silent, save for the low cadence of their voices, measured, cautious, yet laced with an urgency that betrayed the gravity of their discourse. Gaius's eyes burned with a restless energy, youthful yet tempered by the weight of responsibility. He leaned forward, voice low but resolute. "We stand at a crossroads, chieftain. The old Rome falters, its foundations crumbling beneath us. But through alliance, there is strength and survival." The chieftain's gaze was steady, his scarred face unreadable beneath the heavy brow. "You offer terms, young Valerius. What guarantees have we that your family will honor these promises? Rome's decay is no secret, and its nobility unknown for their false words." Gaius's fingers drummed lightly on the rough-hewn table, a flicker of impatience flashing through his otherwise composed demeanor. "Because we have no choice. My family's future, our legacy, depends upon your support. We will offer lands and positions within the new order, a place alongside your people rather than beneath them." The chieftain nodded slowly, considering. "Very well. But understand this alliance is fragile. Betrayal will be met with fire." Outside the chamber, the city's pulse beat on. Meanwhile, in the labyrinthine corridors of the Senate, Livia Valeria moved with a grace and purpose that belied the turmoil beneath her calm exterior. Cloaked in dark silk that whispered softly against the stone floors, her sharp eyes surveyed the faces of senators and courtiers alike. Each whispered exchange, each calculated glance, was a move in a game she had long mastered. Her voice was a murmur, weaving through the corridors like smoke as she exchanged words with key senators. Her persuasive tone cloaked in the guise of concern for Rome's future. "The Valerius family seeks only stability amidst chaos," she assured one wary ally, her expression composed but her mind racing. "Support us, and you secure your own position in the new order." Livia's subtle manipulations were as vital as Gaius's bold negotiations. Her network of influence threaded through the Senate, weaving a safety net that protected her husband's name and their family's fragile standing. Yet, beneath her steely resolve, a shadow of doubt lingered. How far could they bend before breaking? Back at the family villa, Marcus Valerius observed these developments from the quiet refuge of the atrium. The marble columns, once symbols of Roman grandeur, now bore cracks and stains, mirroring the erosion of the empire and his own ideals. His silvering hair caught the fading light as he watched his son and wife maneuver through the treacherous political landscape. A deep melancholy weighed upon him, tempered by a reluctant acceptance. The world he had once known was slipping away, replaced by an uncertain dawn where survival demanded compromise. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a soft murmur. "Perhaps this is the price we pay for life beyond the ashes. Yet the path was not without opposition. Within the Senate's marble halls, Cassius Drusus confronted Gaius with a cold, menacing smile. His scarred visage was a testament to battles fought and won, his eyes glinting with ruthless ambition. "Your alliances are a gamble, young Valerius," Cassius warned, his voice low and threatening. "The old Rome's power wanes, but the cost of defiance is steep. Remember this, loyalty to the empire still commands respect and retribution." Gaius met the gaze without flinching. "The empire you cling to is dying. I choose a future forged in new fires." The tension between them crackled in the charged air, a confrontation emblematic of the larger struggle engulfing Rome itself. As night deepened, the Valerius family found themselves navigating a precarious balance between past and future, tradition and transformation. Gaius's daring negotiations opened a door to survival, while Livia's deft political maneuvers secured their place, albeit diminished in the shifting hierarchy. Marcus, watching from the sidelines, grappled with the costs of adaptation, the erosion of ideals, the fracturing of family bonds, and the uncertain legacy they would leave. The city beyond their walls moaned under the weight of decay. But within the Valerius household, a fragile flame of hope flickered, guarded fiercely against encroaching darkness. The question lingered, could they endure the price of new alliances, or would these compromises ultimately consume all they cherished? The night whispered promises and threats alike as the family prepared to step forward into a world forever changed, their fate intertwined with Rome's uncertain future. The ashes of empire settled slowly, but from their depths, new fires began to glow harsh, unyielding, and full of peril. The chamber was heavy with silence, save for the faint flicker of candlelight dancing against marble walls cracked and worn by time and neglect. Lucilla knelt beside the small altar that had once been resplendent with offerings and incense, but now bore only a few scattered petals and a solitary bronze figurine of Vesta. Her voice trembled as she whispered a prayer, the words ancient and fervent, seeking favor from gods who seemed to have abandoned the city they once protected. "O mighty Jupiter, guardian of Rome," she intoned softly, "hear the cries of your children in their hour of despair. Have we forsaken you, or have you forsaken us?" The room seemed to hold its breath, the dim light casting wavering shadows that stretched like ghosts across the cracked stone floor. Lucilla's delicate hands clenched the worn edges of the altar cloth as tears welled in her eyes. Around her, the faded tapestries and peeling frescoes spoke of a grandeur, now slipping beyond reach, a fading glory mirrored in her own heart. Outside, the city groaned. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer rang unevenly, punctuated by the murmur of restless crowds and the occasional bark of a sentry's call. Rome was unraveling, thread by thread, and the old virtues that had once bound the empire were dissolving into dust. Lucilla rose slowly, her gaze lingering on the altar before she moved toward the window, drawing the heavy curtain aside to look upon the city. From the vantage of the Valerius household, the forum lay smothered in twilight's orange glow, the ruins of temples and basilicas silhouetted against a sky streaked with smoke. Fires smoldered in the distance, their smoke trailing upward in grey ribbons that blurred the fading light. Marcus stood beside her, silent and still, his sharp eyes tracing the outlines of the city he loved yet barely recognized. "It is not the Rome I knew," he said quietly, voice thick with a mixture of grief and resolve. "The pillars of our civilization crumble, and with them the honor we swore to uphold." Lucilla met his gaze, her own filled with a sadness that transcended words. "And yet," she said, "we remain. We bear witness, even as the gods turn their faces away." Marcus sighed, the the weight of years settling heavily upon his broad shoulders. I see now the price we pay for survival. Each compromise, each betrayal of our principles chips away at the foundation we built. But what choice remains? To cling to ideals as the world burns, or to bend and break so we might endure? Livia entered the room then, her presence a quiet but firm counterbalance. Her dark eyes scanned the scene with practiced calm, the austerity of her beauty sharpening the tension that hung in the air. "We have already chosen, Marcus," she said softly. "Our survival demands it. The Empire is no longer the world it once was. We must navigate these treacherous waters or be swallowed by them." Marcus turned toward his wife, his expression a mixture of respect and sorrow. "You wield pragmatism like a blade, Livia, cutting away all that is sacred. But I wonder what remains once the blood has dried." She stepped closer, voice steady. "What remains is life, our family, our legacy, not in statues or Senate seats, but in flesh and blood." The room grew still once more, the conversation hanging between them like a fragile thread. Outside, the city exhaled a low, mournful breath, as if acknowledging the truth in their words. Marcus's thoughts drifted to the past, to youthful days spent in the Senate chambers, to his governorship in distant provinces, to the ideals that had once seemed unbreakable. Those days now felt like echoes from another lifetime, overshadowed by the relentless tide of change. Later, as the household retired for the evening, Lucilla found herself wandering the empty streets near the Palatine Hill. The moon cast pale light over cracked stones and broken pillars, the silence broken only by her soft footsteps. She paused before a dilapidated statue of an emperor long forgotten, its features worn and indistinct. Her fingers traced the weathered marble, seeking in the cold stone a connection to a past that was slipping away. "What have we become?" she whispered to the night, her breath visible in the chill air. A sudden gust rustled dry leaves, carrying with it the distant sound of a lute played mournfully somewhere within the city walls. Lucilla closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her, a lament for a world fading into shadow. Back within the Valerius home, Marcus sat alone in his study, the weight of his reflections pressing down like the heavy curtains drawn against the night. His fingers traced the spine of an ancient tome, its pages yellowed and fragile. He thought of the sacrifices demanded by survival, of the alliances forged in shadows, of the family torn between loyalty and change. The Empire's decay was not merely a matter of crumbling stone and lost battles, but a deeper erosion of spirit and purpose. Marcus wondered if the legacy they preserved was one of strength or of surrender. Could Rome rise again from its ashes, or was it destined to be remembered only in stories whispered by those who dared to hope? As dawn approached, faint light touched the horizon, casting long, uncertain shadows across the city. Marcus rose, steeling himself for the trials yet to come. The path ahead was fraught with peril and compromise, but he would walk it with the dignity and resolve that had defined his house for generations. Outside, the first birds sang softly, their voices fragile yet insistent, a reminder that even in decay, life stirs anew. The fading glory of Rome was not yet extinguished, and within the Valerius family, a reluctant hope endured. The city awaited its next chapter, and with it, the legacy of those who dared to shape its uncertain future. The morning mist lingered low over the shattered remains of Rome, casting a pale veil over the city's broken spires and crumbled arches. From his vantage upon the Palatine Hill, Marcus Valerius gazed out across the ruins, where the proud heart of the Empire once beat with unyielding strength. Now, only fragments remain marble, shattered, temples desecrated, the Forum a hollow echo of its former grandeur. Smoke still rose from distant fires, a tangible reminder of the chaos that had razed the city's core. The cold light of dawn revealed the jagged skyline, a silhouette of decay against a sky reluctantly brightening with the promise of a new day. Marcus's shoulders were heavy with the weight of years and loss. His sharp eyes, once bright with idealism, now held a quiet fatigue, tempered by a steely resolve. He was a man transformed, shaped by the relentless tides of history that had swept away the world he had known. The Valerius family, once bastions of tradition and honor, had survived the empire's collapse only by bending beneath the storm. Yet survival came at a cost: bonds broken, compromises made, and a legacy forever altered. Behind him, the ancestral home stood battered but intact, a sanctuary amid the ruin. Within its stone walls, Livia and Gaius moved with the purposeful grace of those hardened by necessity. Livia's eyes, sharp and calculating, flickered with the shadows cast by flickering candlelight. She whispered plans and alliances, weaving threads of influence through the fragile political tapestry of Rome's new order. Gaius, restless and impassioned, leaned into each strategy with a fire that both inspired and unsettled. Their voices, low and urgent, spoke of survival and adaptation, words Marcus had once resisted but now understood as the harsh truth of their age. In the twilight of the empire, even Lucilla, the gentle moral compass of the family, wandered the shattered streets with a sadness that clung to her like a shroud. Her delicate fingers traced the cracked marble of the Forum's columns, each fissure a testament to the decay of ideals she had cherished. She mourned not only the city's physical ruin, but the erosion of the virtues that had once defined Rome: honor, mercy, faith. The gods seemed silent now, their temples abandoned, their voices a distant memory. The new Senate chamber, a modest hall far removed from the opulence of the past, buzzed with uneasy energy. Old senators and new powers sat side by side, their alliances tentative and fraught with suspicion. Cassius Drusus's shadow loomed, larger reminder that ruthless ambition still thrived amid the ruins. Yet even his cold eyes reflected the uncertainty of an empire reborn in ashes. Here pragmatism wrestled with tradition, and survival demanded a delicate balance of trust and guarded wariness. Marcus listened to the murmurs of debate, the clinking of goblets, the whispered promises and veiled threats. He felt the pulse of a city struggling to breathe anew, fragile but persistent. The Valerius name no longer commanded the unquestioned respect of old Rome, but it endured, carried forward by sacrifice and compromise. Marcus understood now that clinging to the past unyieldingly was a luxury they could no longer afford. The family's future lay not in stubborn loyalty to fading ideals, but in the hard-won resilience to navigate a transformed world. Night deepened, and the city's lights flickered like dying stars. Marcus stood once more upon the balcony, the cool air heavy with the scent of ash and earth. His thoughts turned inward to the faces of his family, Livia's steely determination, Gaius's restless ambition, Lucilla's quiet sorrow. Each bore the scars of their trials. Each embodied a fragment of Rome's fractured soul. "We endure," he whispered to the night, a vow as much to himself as to the city below. Not as it was, but as it must be. The ashes of empire settled around them, but from those ashes stirred the fragile breath of life. Rome's twilight was bittersweet, marked by loss, yet tinged with a reluctant hope. The Valerius family faced an uncertain future, their legacy forever changed, their strength tested but unbroken. In the quiet resilience of their survival lay a promise that even in decay there is the possibility of renewal. As dawn broke anew, the city's silhouette softened against the light. Marcus turned from the ruined horizon, stepping back into the house where his family waited. The path ahead was fraught with peril and sacrifice, but it was theirs to walk together amidst the ashes. The story of Rome's twilight was far from over, and in its telling, the Valerius family would write a new chapter not of empire, but of endurance. The wheels of Marcus Valerius's carriage clattered unevenly against the uneven stones of the Via Appia, the familiar yet altered landscape of Rome unfurling before him like a faded tapestry. As the provincial governor returned to the heart of the empire, his gaze swept over the city's once glorious visage, now marred by neglect and unrest. The air, thick with dust and the smell of smoke from distant fires, carried whispers of discontent and decay. The great walls, which had stood for centuries as bulwarks against invasion, bore fresh scars, cracks wide enough to catch the morning light and crumble with the slightest touch. Marcus's thoughts were heavy with the weight of his responsibilities. Each stone seemed to echo the empire's slow, inexorable decline. The once vibrant forum, the bustling nerve center of Roman life, was quieter than he remembered, its marble columns chipped and weathered. The voices of senators and citizens replaced by the distant clang of soldiers drilling and the murmurs of an anxious populace. Upon reaching the Valerius family's ancestral villa, the air inside was thick with tension. The once grand halls, adorned with frescoes depicting Rome's heroic past, now seemed suffused with a somber stillness. Livia met Marcus at the entrance, her sharp eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and guarded calculation. "Welcome home," she said softly, her voice steady but betraying the weight she carried. "Rome has changed while you were away." Gaius, their son, stood apart near the hearth, his youthful energy barely contained. His gaze, sharp and restless, flicked between his parents as if challenging them to see the world as he did, a world in flux, demanding new alliances and bold action. Lucilla, Marcus's younger sister, sat quietly near a window, her delicate hands folded in her lap. Her calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the rising storm within the room. The family convened in the triclinium, the chamber where generations of Valerius had debated the fate of Rome. Voices rose and fell as they argued over the empire's direction. Marcus, steadfast and measured, defended the virtues of tradition and honor. "We are the guardians of Rome's legacy," he intoned, "and we must stand firm against the tides of chaos." Livia countered with a pragmatism honed by years of court intrigue. "The old ways will not save us," she argued. "Survival requires adaptation, even if it means compromise." Gaius, his youthful passion ignited, spoke boldly of forging new paths beyond Rome's dying structures. "Clinging to the past will only hasten our ruin. We must embrace change or be swept away." Lucilla's voice, gentle yet resolute, sought to mediate. "Let us not lose sight of our principles, even as the world shifts beneath our feet. Mercy and honor must guide us still." As night deepened, the family's debates wove a tapestry of conflicting loyalties and fears. Marcus found himself torn between his unwavering duty to Rome's traditions and the pragmatic calls for survival voiced by those he loved. The city outside, shrouded in shadows, and the distant echoes of unrest seemed to mirror the turmoil within. Later, standing on the villa's balcony, Marcus gazed over the twilight-soaked city. The fading light cast long shadows over the broken statues and empty forums, monuments to a grandeur slipping beyond reach. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant cries of watchmen and the rustle of autumn leaves stirred by a cold breeze. In that moment, Marcus understood the profound truth of his return. Rome was no longer the bastion of certainty it had once been. Its heart beat unevenly, fragile yet persistent. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, demanding courage and sacrifice. Inside, Livia approached, her presence a steady anchor amid the storm. Their conversation was hushed but charged with unspoken fears and hopes. "We must be ready, Marcus," she said. "The world is changing, and so must we." He nodded slowly, the weight of his lineage pressing upon him. "For Rome, and for our family, we will endure." As the night deepened, the city's distant fires glimmered like dying embers, a stark reminder of the fragile flame they sought to protect. The struggle for Rome's soul had begun anew, and the Valerius family stood at its uncertain center. The first step had been taken, but the road ahead promised trials that would test every bond and belief.